All right, welcome everybody. We are running a couple minutes behind time, so I'm going to jump right in. Thank you for joining our session on preparing teachers for environmental project-based learning in every district as part of our equity strand. We have 5 excellent panelists who are going to help excavate different parts of this challenge. I think, I'll say, I think those of us who are at this conference probably understand that that teacher professional development is key to any intervention that we do in education, certainly in terms of environmental literacy, and that the MWEE itself, the Meaningful Watershed Educational Experience, at its core really is a project-based learning approach. So that brings some of its challenges. We certainly wanted to address that as part of the conference and situate that in the context of our equity conversation. We do have a lot to cover, so I'm going to ask folks to, if you're not a panelist, to stay muted for us during when the panelists are speaking. Please drop your questions into the chat function. Nora Carlos is joining me today. I have already introduced myself, but just to reintroduce, I'm Tom Ackerman from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, co-chair of the work group. Nora is a colleague of mine at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, who's going to help facilitate this session. So please drop questions into the chat. We will do our best to kind of integrate them into the flow of the panel, but we might have to catch a number of them sort of at the end, and I hope to have a little bit of time to have a few questions at the end for our panelists to address. Remember, your goal as a participant is to try to pick up at least 2 ideas that you can bring back to your state breakout sessions. Those state breakout sessions are really the motor for pushing the work of this conference forward into the upcoming years. So please keep some notes on that you can bring back. We are recording. Nora's already started the recording for this session, so be mindful of that. And if you don't want to be recorded, please turn off your camera. Anything else that I am missing? I think I've got all my ground rules covered. I'd like to sort of kick things off by inviting you to respond to an opening question. And Nora, can I ask you to drop that Padlet link in so that all of our participants can respond to this, and I will share my screen in a moment. But here's the thought. In our work at CBF, we've certainly run across this, and we have an active conversation actually with some of our partners in Baltimore City about what are the real barriers to implementing programs, teacher training programs, other environmental literacy programs with under-resourced districts, and what are the perceived barriers? Because both of these can be obstacles to making progress, right? And so I just invite you, as I introduce the panelists, to respond to those 2 questions on the Padlet, and I should share my screen here. And just kind of drop into that Padlet your responses to that question. What are some perceived barriers to instituting a project with an under-resourced district, and what are some of the real barriers? And I'll be inviting our panelists to answer the same question. Nora, is it possible for you to share the Padlet, share screen?
Yes, it is.
That'd be great, because for some reason it's not allowing me to access my.
Can you all see that okay?
Perfect.
Let me know if you need to zoom in or anything.
Yeah, so go ahead, drop in some ideas. Feel free. Some people may interpret some things as perceived or real differently, depending on your experience. Obviously, we're not going to have a lot of time to explain our answers, but go ahead and just drop some ideas in there, and that'll help get us started, get us thinking about this topic. While you're doing that, I just want to give a quick introduction of our 5 panelists. I'm very excited to have these 5 representatives of environmental literacy and project-based learning joining us today. They bring a breadth of experience from the school level and the district level, from higher ed to NGOs, to training organizations, and really glad to have them here to help us address this topic. We have Simone Barkley and I'm going to invite actually each of these speakers to introduce themselves a little bit. But why don't we go ahead and do that? I'll sort of run down our 5 speakers, and then I'll invite you to give a few words about your connection to this work. But we have Simone Barkley, Manager of Education Programs from the National Aquarium in Baltimore City. Simone is working on some really exciting partnerships with pre-service teachers and higher ed institutions. We have Donald Bell, the Environmental Outreach Educator from Prince George's County, the Schmidt Center. That's one of our largest school systems in the entire watershed with almost 130,000 students. Vanessa Farrel joins us from Old Dominion University. She's the Research Associate for the Center for Education Partnerships and the former Science Coordinator for Hampton City Schools in Virginia. We have Jeff Remington, a Palmyra School District STEM educator and an NSTA STEM ambassador. Palmyra School District is in Pennsylvania. Palmyra Area School District is in Pennsylvania. And we have Sarah Field joining us from PBL Works, who's a national leader on project-based learning, and she's the Senior Curriculum Manager. So I'd like to invite Simone to kick us off, just a minute or two on your connection to environmental literacy and the projects that you work on in this context.
Sure, thanks, Tom, and hi everyone. So I lead one of the district-wide MWEEs that we offer here in Baltimore City. And it's to 6th grade students. Our program is called What Lives in the Harbor, and it brings students down to the Inner Harbor at the National Aquarium, where we have them take samples of the harbor and test the water quality and come up with a kind of like a hypothesis about what animals they think would be able to survive in our harbor based on the water quality. From that, they then pull up these habitat cages that we have deployed off of our pier, and they get to identify the animals that are actually living in the harbor. So this, of course, is for many of the students, their first time seeing what lives in this harbor. If you've ever been to the Inner Harbor, it likely doesn't look like to you that anything even lives here, but we have documented at least 37 different species that are here. That includes American eel, that includes blue crabs, that includes all different types of fish, and the students are the ones that are identifying these animals and talking about how humans have contributed to some of the changes in the water quality that might prevent that biodiversity from growing here in the harbor. So this is a really exciting program because it's definitely hands-on, inquiry-based, local, but one of the really exciting portions and aspects of this project is that we partnered with local colleges. So we partnered with Morgan State University, Coppin State University, Towson University to get interns from their education department and their natural sciences departments to teach the students when they come to our site. So that is what I think is something that's a bit more unique about our program, and knowing that that Maryland and has that environmental literacy goal that students have to leave with some connection to their local watershed, and that environmental literacy is embedded into their curriculum. We wanted to make sure that the teachers that are going into schools as they finish college, that they also are prepared to teach about science, to do project-based learning. And so that's one of the really great aspects that we've introduced in this program. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the question and answer portion of this. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Simone. And for those of you not from Maryland, it's notable that Morgan and Coppin are HBCUs. I'd like to invite Donald Bell to introduce himself. Donald?
All right. Thank you, Tom, and greetings, everyone. I'm Donald Bell with the William Schmidt Center. As Tom mentioned, we are the Outdoor and Environmental Education Center for Prince George's County Public Schools in Maryland. I work on a team of environmental literacy outreach educators. And so how I explain that is I'm a teacher just like any teacher in our district, but my classroom is literally the county, Prince George's County, our campus, every school campus, every park, and in between. And so a few of the project-based activities and learning opportunities that I support One is called Muscle Power in partnership with the Anacostia Watershed Society and National Park Service and Foundation. And in that program, our teachers and students learn about and engage with muscles. They grow, measure, and study the muscles at their school for a period of time. And they get to do a few hands-on investigations, both in their classroom and in the field when they go to deliver the mussels in our local waterways in order to improve water quality. And another program that we just started, is still in the pilot phase this year, is called Homegrown Heroes, which is in response to the pandemic. We were looking for opportunities for students to be able to do something hands-on at home. And we said, well, students can start gardens. Many of our families are food insecure. And so how can we get materials to them such that they can grow at home, build those real life skills, and bring them back to the school setting when we're back in person?
Excellent. Thanks, Donald. And the work that that Donald and his team do to integrate student action is really, really impressive. Dr. Vanessa Farrel from ODU.
Good morning, everyone. I am, as Tom just said, Vanessa Farrel, and I have a wonderful history with Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I actually, when I started, I was the science supervisor in Virginia Beach City Public Schools. And then I transitioned to Hampton for the second time in 2014-2015 school year. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit about that part of it. When we did back in 2014, only 41% of the schools were accredited. And I'm happy to say that as I left them in March, 100% of the schools were accredited during the 2019-2020 school year. And if you don't know about Hampton, it serves about 60% African-American students, and 55% of those are economically disadvantaged. And it wasn't just one thing, it was a systems approach, but it was also kind of getting teachers on board, and then administrators, and then students, and then the community, and understanding that. So we wrote and implemented a NOAA BWAC grant. It was the first to occur in Hampton City Schools at the time, and participated in numerous other grants and things. But one of the things that was really important about this one was it focused on teachers, because one of the things we noticed when we came back and we started that, and I built my department up, was that teachers didn't have the efficacy, and students won't get the efficacy without teachers having that efficacy. So that grant led to a really great experience for teachers. And, it's one of those that started out with, a week long with CBF in the field. And then, of course, the 2 to 3 days throughout the year, and all of the different things. And some of the things that came out of that were oyster restoration projects, where the students grew oysters and they planted them on the reef. So they saw it actually to fruition. Designing habitat cages. So when the teachers actually taught those units, they brought their habitat cages into the classroom. The students had that hands-on experience. And rain gardens, pollinating gardens, storm drain stenciling. I mean, I could go on and on about some of the projects that came out of that weren't even thought of at that point. It was just about getting teachers, and it wasn't just a grade level. It was looking at it going from kindergarten all the way to high school, and giving them more than just that one experience at the elementary, the middle school, and the high school level. But then since the grant has ended, it was always a big thing about sustainability, what that's going to look like, and how we were going to be able to sustain that. Well, one of the things that had to be able to sustain is obviously funding, but other than that, it had to live in the curriculum. And so to get the funding, we had to show the importance in the curriculum. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that when we get to the question, and what that structure looks like, and what activities and where we connected it into the curriculum, and where it can be done. So it becomes one of those things that it's real for our students, because when you talk about students that, if you don't know this, Hampton's a peninsula, but it was amazing when they said they'd never been on the water. It was also heartbreaking when you have kids that are out, and the first time they go to the beach, they're in 4th or 5th grade with their teachers and us and CBF, and we're excited, but we're also like, you live here, you could literally walk here. and so just getting them out, and then of course getting their parents to take them back, and it just see the transformation in what occurred, because I was back there the second time, because I originally taught there, and I used to do that as a teacher, but being able to do that for an entire district and actually being able to present and talk about that at the state level has been truly like just wonderful. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, so I'm going to let the next person go.
Right on. Thanks, Vanessa. And we're just so pleased to have been a partner in that project and such a great example of what can be accomplished. Jeff Remington from Palmyra Area School District.
Great, yeah, thanks, Tom. Great to meet everybody. Great conference. So I wear two hats. I'm a National STEM Teacher Ambassador, which was a special program by NSTA and NCTM. And in my training in the Beltway, had to bring home a project to do. And my project was to try to advocate to get our science and environmental standards redone. They were conceived in 1996. They were legislatively adopted in 2002. We have been using those standards for everything since then, testing, all that sort of stuff. So that's, I think 7 years before the iPhone even rolled out. Like that's where we're at with environmental studies and things like that. No mention of climate change or anything like that. But the current standards that we've advocated and worked for are in the regulatory process. And they are in the public comment phase, and they will teach climate change for the first time in PA history, which will be a good springboard for this and for PBLs. In my 35 years of teaching, we do some great projects that really, I think, will be the kinds of projects that will be able to be done when we talk about what these standards will do. So I'm just going to put a couple links in the chat that you can see some of the PBLs we do. We do a grasshopper field study. We do a week-long environmental ed camp. So at your leisure, you can look at those to get a sense for what we're doing. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing, Jeff. Appreciate it. And we'll hopefully, if we have time, come back around to that at the end. Sarah Fields, Senior Curriculum Manager for PBL Works.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here with you all today. My name is Sarah. Yeah, and I work with PBL Works. We are a nonprofit organization that works nationally and internationally to support teachers in implementing project-based learning with students. We also support school and system leaders in creating the conditions that are necessary for PBL to thrive as an instructional approach. So thinking a lot about the barriers that I'm seeing people post, and those are a lot of the things that we work to help address at a systems level. And we have found over time that PBL, as you all have found, is really an incredible way to address environmental literacy, because it's really about engaging students in learning content and skills through tackling authentic problems in their communities and in the world around them. So that's really what we're all about. And we also believe that PBL is really one of the most powerful pedagogies for equity in school and really redistributing power in the classroom, thinking about how to create really authentic, cognitively demanding tasks that are going to engage students and invite them to bring their strengths, their skills and their identities into the classroom and into their learning experiences. So excited to talk more about kind of how all the different ways that we work to support teachers in this, but really just thrilled that PBL fused with environmental literacy is growing in the Mid-Atlantic region and everywhere, and hopeful about the future for that reason.
Right on. Thanks for being with us, Sarah. So thank you all for adding your comments to the real and perceived barriers piece. I think we see a lot of things that we're familiar with under our barriers. It's interesting to see how people are interpreting some different things. Obviously, funding, the lack of instructional time. I see administrators on both sides of this list, which is interesting. Awareness, teacher training, standards being sort of linked in there. And you've heard our panelists already addressing that need for this to be embedded in the curriculum. and in standards as well. So I think we'll be tying a number of these in as we go through our discussion questions here. Nora, can you go ahead and bring us back to the full screen? So glad Nora's here to help me. So I would we've got a few questions. I hope to kind of pitch each of these questions to one of our panelists to start and have our other panelists sort of jump in as we go. I encourage our participants to actively use the chat. We'll try to pull you in that way, and then hopefully have a few minutes for some questions at the end. So we're going to start with first question to Sarah. What are some of the key elements that you see from your position in successfully instituting a project-based learning program with schools? And what are sort of some of the key elements, particularly around teacher training?
Sure, yeah. So I see some of this. I'm going to kind of draw from the Padlet and kind of fuse it into what I share. But one of the things that we feel is really important is for all stakeholders in the school community to kind of co-create a collective vision for what this work will look like. So we often start off by inviting, school leaders, teachers, community members, often even students, to create what we call sort of a portrait of a graduate. So thinking about what are the knowledge, skills, dispositions that we really want our students to leave with, and use that as kind of an anchor for all of the work that comes next. And also use that to drive some of the structural changes that need to happen in order to create this time and space for PBL. So that might include shifts in scheduling so that teachers have time to collaboratively design and reflect. It might include shifts to assessment and teacher evaluation policies and practices at the school and district level. So really thinking through what are the ways that we need to adjust all of our practices so that they're really aligned with this vision that we have for students. Another sort of component that is really important and that addresses, for me, what I think is a real barrier to implementing PBL in a lot of places, which is that often, I know that I didn't really experience high quality PBL as a learner when I was in school, and I had to kind of relearn, what an educational experience could be. So we, really recommend having teachers, having leaders, even again, families, community members, engage as learners in a project so that they can understand how that experience is different and the value that it has for students, and also can understand how a project can really be the vehicle for teaching rigorous content and skills, for teaching the standards. We often talk about sort of main course projects rather than dessert projects. So, having, even if it's just a one-day project that educators can engage in as learners, that can really help to kind of set the stage for ongoing commitment, for the mindset shift that needs to happen in many cases with PBL. And then it's, a combination of really practical support. So we work with teachers to think about how to design community-based projects and have some frameworks and structures and kind of best practices that we recommend for that. So really practical supports, and then also, continued kind of coaching and supports for the transformational work that this really is. So it's kind of, countercultural in some ways to be thinking about, doing projects that are truly learner driven, that engage students, in solving problems that nobody knows the answer to. And so how do we kind of stay in this work for the long haul and do the work within ourselves to kind of, make the shifts that that really need to happen to support students. So we really talk about kind of vision, culture, capacity building, and continuous improvement as kind of the 4 levers for making the shift to PBL at a school-wide level.
Right on. I think that the piece about the learner-driven aspect, which is natural to PBL, also helps us with the equity approach, because it's so much more natural for students to bring in their personal experience, especially when they're trying to take on one of these complex problems. They're natively able to do it from their own perspective and their community's perspective. I'd like to invite any of our other panelists to sort of jump in on what Sarah shared with us, or your experience with PBL programs in your context.
Yeah, well, I think just jumping on to what you just mentioned, Tom, and Dr. King earlier in the keynote mentioned, right, like a sense of place, both past, present, and future, right? And a lot of times that is lacking, and the PBL approach gives that back to our students, right, to help develop and create that sense of equity. Students need to see where they fit, and this actually went into my perceived barrier that unfortunately sometimes we still have to deal with, is that I will often get the question, will our students be interested in whatever environmental project that we're talking about, if it's the mussels or starting a garden at home? And absolutely, they will be interested, right? But can we create the pathway where they can see their past, present, and future in it?
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it up, and I totally agree. Let me move on to question 2 here, and I'm going to pitch this to Vanessa. What do we need to successfully implement a program district-wide? You've done it in a couple of different districts with different profiles. What are those key elements that we need to take this from the school level to the district level?
Well, I would say the biggest difference is looking at what the actual district needs. So I'm going to speak about Hampton, because when you walk into Hampton to actually pitch it, we're going to do environmental literacy, and they had other issues. There were other things. Like I said, when you're 41% accredited, you have bigger issues. And so to put that in the forefront, it was all about how to actually increase that teacher efficacy. So that first year of getting teachers out and getting them in the field and getting their students, the data speaks for itself. You notice a difference in their scores. You notice that. And then the second year is when we had those principals of those teachers come out on the boat with us, and they lived that experience. And then they went back and they talked about it. And then the next year, it was almost like it was a really great design, but some of that was just happening. So you had school board members come out, and we had central office people come out, and when they were seeing the change, and then teachers were writing curriculum, and then they were implementing that curriculum. And then, when you start talking about that, and we talk about just getting students interested. So I'm going to go back to that barrier of students being interested. When you're talking about a dichotomous key, so example, when you're doing a macroinvertebrate investigation, and you talk about benthic factors, dichotomous keys, classification, and water quality, those were areas where it fit into the curriculum. And normally when you start speaking that way, some students turn off. But when you actually bring in a habitat cage and you give them a dichotomous key, or have them create a dichotomous key, the conversation changes completely. Or when you take them to the actual environment and having those experiences, and the students realizing that I can go back to this place. It wasn't that far. And granted, getting on a boat and going out, yes, that was completely different, but they could go back to the same beach. They could go to the City Bottom Nature Park. They could go to those places, which is why it was always important that you do it in their local environment. So somewhere they can go back, somewhere they can access, somewhere they can, continue that conversation, and then threading it through elementary, middle, and high school in the curriculum. So when they start talking about in 6th grade, energy and movement, and then 4th grade, they're talking about food chains and trophic levels, which continue all the way to high school. And it shows up everywhere. Then when they do benthic sampling, they understand that. Schoolyard report card, you're talking about natural resources, human impact, all the stewardship products. I could go on and on about, but the idea is where it fits in the curriculum. So when you pull it out and you say, okay, here is where it is in the curriculum, and we made it very explicit. So when we put the administrators on the boat, they looked at, here are your elementary standards, here are the middle school standards, here are the high school, and we made them all rotate throughout. And so telling the elementary principal, hey, if you don't allow your teachers to teach the science during this time, or you don't encourage them to do it, and it's not something that's imperative, look at the impact you have in middle school. And then middle school, when you don't do that, look at the impact you have in high school. And then you talk about portrait of a graduate. They're not prepared. They're not ready for those STEM careers. They're not prepared for any kind of career in that. You were already limiting them. And we're the experience and exposure they get, and understanding that. But teachers weren't bad. They wanted to do it. They didn't have the efficacy to do it. So giving them that efficacy and making them very comfortable that they would then become the owner of that knowledge. They didn't have to always have to seek someone else out. They understood it. So that intense week, and then those 3 or 4 days in between the school year to kind of check in with them, and then going in to those classrooms. So it wasn't one of those things. I never lived in my office. My staff never, and I never did. We were in the classroom. And I think they realized that they were like, yeah, you just want to go have a good time. So if the boat was moving, we were on the boat with the kids and having those experiences, but the kids seeing that. And it's funny, when you go into the grocery store, you go to the movie theater before COVID, by the way, but they see you and they go, hey, that's the science lady. And you're like, yeah, that would be me. And they have the parents come up and have a conversation with you, and they ask you, okay, how do we do that? But even in the summer of, we've done Kids in CAG, we've done all kinds of programs so that a conversation continues. It never stops at the end of the school year and you have to pick it back up. It's always a constant thing. And it's funny, the first lady of Virginia, Pam Northam, came down just to check out the program. And I've had these conversations, and it became one of those things where you don't stop the conversation. It never ends. It just becomes part of how you do business. And it, like I said, it lives in the curriculum. It lives in everything that you talk about and everything that you do in any future projects, and then getting everybody in the community involved. I mean, the partnerships are, just, they're too many to name, and then giving the teachers the ability to connect with those people as well. And one of the things that we did, and I know you're thinking, oh, well, everybody didn't join in and do that during the training, but what ended up happening is that last year, which we asked for an extension, we had our teachers who had been doing it all along, which actually more than 50% had actually participated in it, but they trained everybody else. It was a required PD. So every 5th grade, every 6th, 7th, 8th science grade teacher, as well as high school. And then we had history, we had all kinds of others came to our PD and joined in, but it was a requirement that every teacher learn that. Not only was it in the curriculum, but then every teacher was then taught by their colleague during that PD in that summer of that last year. So they had to learn it. The expectation was there. And then we went into those classes to monitor that they were actually doing it. So yes, it takes that follow through for that. But it is definitely well worth it, as you can see, like I said, in the scores. To go from
that's where it is, like showing that, shining a light on those bright spots early and late, connecting it to what the school district cares about, primarily those achievement scores, and what you were able to do with them is amazing. Another thing, out of the many things that you highlighted as key elements, Vanessa, engaging leadership and at multiple levels, and that certainly was a huge part of your success there, and something that we should all look to replicate. I'm going to go ahead, and I'm trying to keep us on time here, so I'm going to jump to our next question if everybody's okay. I feel like you're going to have this recording shared, so you may have to go back and listen to all that. But I think the Hampton City story is such a great case study. Let me go to Simone here and ask about the last thing that Vanessa mentioned, or the second to last thing, partnerships. How can you engage partnerships, particularly with those higher education teacher prep programs, to make a sustained program that benefits environmental literacy?
So, when we started this program, it was just built with the National Aquarium staff, which at the time was maybe 7 people, and meanwhile running all of the other programs that we run here, which are numerous and countless. And so there was no way that we could really offer a district-wide MWEE, which would entail us doing this program every single day, and only this program with just our 7 staff members. In addition to having a limited staff, of course, similar to what Vanessa was speaking about in the demographics of Hampton, Baltimore City's public schools is 75% African American, and our staff at the time, I was the only African American on the staff. So we clearly were not matching with the demographics of our students. And as we heard in the keynote and all throughout today, right, like representation is key, but for some reason, for many reasons, we are not keeping Black educators or educators of color. They aren't staying with schools, and or they aren't being hired. And so I really wanted to figure out how can we change that narrative for this program. This program might be the only time that these students are going to get an opportunity to do some hands-on inquiry, to do some STEM learning, to come out. And again, just like Vanessa mentioned, like, this is crazy, right? Baltimore City and the harbor is like, this is right smack dab in the middle of Baltimore. And sometimes kids never come down here and like actually spend time. It looks like it's like a tourist area, right? It's not what people actually use as a space to learn. And so we really wanted to change that narrative. We really wanted to make sure that if they are participating in this program, and if this is their only opportunity to learn about the environment, that we get them and we hook them, and this lasts and continues with them as they go through school. And so I reached out to Morgan State University and to their education department and talked to them a little bit about this program, about what we're trying to do here, and asked if they have any opportunities currently for their students, for their college students that are in the education department to teach science. And we found out that they didn't. So they do have placements, but they aren't teaching science. And so that was one of the benefits of us partnering with them, is that we were giving those, by us working together, those pre-service teachers were now getting the opportunity to teach science, to practice science before they go into the classroom. And we, the National Aquarium, we were getting, kind of like an offset for our staffing, and the students were seeing teachers and educators who look like them. So this is something that benefited every single person, every group that was a part of this project. And I think that that's something that's very important to note, that it's not just about like what benefits you. Partnerships are truly about everyone benefiting and everyone growing. And so we reached out to Morgan. They were on board. We worked on bringing their students into this program. And by doing so, I had to train the college students on this. They likely didn't even know what a watershed was when I first started working with them. So that also, right, then again, like, this program, I get so worked up because this program is, so dynamic in that we are not only reaching out to the teachers and giving them the foundation, but thinking about those college students who never even learned this stuff. And we were, I don't know where I think it was maybe earlier, or just talked about it, right? That like some of the standards and things were so out of date, and students hadn't learned about climate change, and these college students hadn't even learned what a watershed is. And so we wanted to be able to also give them that foundation, right? And if this is a requirement for the state, they should know these things. And so it can start with us as we do this partnership. And as we work through that, we were able to give the college students the training, the same experience that we give to the students when they come down. So we have them participate in it. We know that, trying something firsthand is the best way for you to be able to then go on and teach it to someone else. So we had the college students participate. And then we also train them on how to do instruction in an outdoor setting, because that presents its own set of challenges that they likely have never faced. And then we also ask them to kind of like bring their own teaching style to the work that they do. So when they're out here on the pier, I do ask them, like, you're going to be teaching about, dissolved oxygen, and I might give them a certain, couple of bullet points that I want them to share, but the way that they share the information is up to them. So they can create their own supplemental resources. They can create any materials that they think will be helpful for the students, and giving the pre-service teachers that autonomy ensures that they also are ready to design their own MWEEs, design their own project-based learning when they do go in the classroom. So this is really how we work these partnerships, and we invite the professors, we invite the students to do presentations with us when we talk about this work. If we write papers, we also collaborate with them on that. We've had some of our pre-service teachers that have gone into the classroom and then have come back to bring their students to participate in this program. program. And so it's really nice to see it come full circle. We've had pre-service teachers that have come to work for us after finishing their college degree. And so I think this program has really signified the benefit and the power of authentic partnership, and how you have to always be willing to go back to the table and make sure that the partnership is doing what we want it to do and moving everyone forward. I think that also was very critical. I'm going to stop talking because I know we have like 5 minutes.
They gave us an extra 5 minutes, so we go to 11:35. But thank you, Simone. And I had the good fortune to see a presentation that Simone did with some of her partners from the higher ed side. And what really impressed me was how they had been brought around through participating in this project to see the tremendous value for that. As Simone was saying, it benefits everybody. I mean, those teacher prep folks they are now out there evangelizing for this approach, which is so fantastic to see, because we know it's so valuable for any science teachers to have this kind of experience. So a really great example of how to bring all this together in a win-win-win. Speaking of creating buy-in at the teacher level, I'd like to invite Donald to kind of address the question of how in your projects, in your work, how do you generate teacher buy-in and generate opportunities or create opportunities for collaborative professional learning at the teacher level?
Okay, so in terms of creating buy-in and developing those professional learning communities, a few thoughts on our approaches to both the Muscle Power project as well as other projects that we're carrying out. One, we always try to start in this word, we'll use it a few different ways here, of being authentic, right? So both from an aspect of person and place, but also in terms of the impact that both the teacher and the students can have. Our teachers are looking for opportunities that they will be able to connect with their students on. And in many of our recent professional development sessions, environmental justice has been a growing trend and topic in our professional developments. So teacher awareness of environmental justice is increasing, which provides a rich opportunity to create buy-in, right, on local and national issues. Another element of the approach to the teacher buy-in is having a trusted source, frankly. At the William Schmidt Center, we've spent time building a brand such that we're sort of the 1-800 number for environmental learning in Prince George's County. And with that, the teachers know if I approach them with an opportunity, it will be rigorous. They will learn from it. They will be supported by our staff and by the school community. And so we work to maintain and build those relationships. So for our audience, whoever that 1-800 environmental number is in your area, connecting with the staff that are in the buildings, talking with teachers daily, right, can certainly help create that buy-in as well. In terms of developing the community, we look for teachers with different lenses and backgrounds. So in addition to our regular channels like our science chairs and our science teacher meetings, right, we have a broader environmental movement growing in the county. And so we reached out to those teachers as well. And so in our pilot phase, we have biology and chemistry teachers alongside CTE teachers and special program teachers. And the conversations that are generated because of the different lenses all help feed into and grow the program tremendously. Just a quick example, we have a teacher in the program that covers engineering design as a part of their process. Well, they took from our training that I want to look at the actual container that the mussels grow in and have that be an engineering challenge for our students. And in the first year of the program, they made recommendations that were actually adopted. And so the container that the muscles grow in has now changed because of the interaction of the students and because of their teachers having those different backgrounds. A few other points in terms of the learning community has certainly been critical, especially during the pandemic, since we did continue to run the program with changes, right? And so making sure that that learning community was there when teachers have their muscles at home now instead of in the classroom. And how do we support each other in that environment was certainly important. And then the last thing I'll just mention quickly is, in addition to establishing the regular norms like equity of voice and like your communication vehicle, we also always want to make sure we offer opportunities for teachers to learn and enhance the program. So our teachers know this from the beginning, that you are part of the building process. And so they've directly contributed to lesson writing, equipment setup, techniques for data collection, methods for data analysis, and framework for the program expansion as we go district-wide. And they know that they are part of that process. And so all of those help to create buy-in and develop the learning community as it moves.
That's so great. I mean, just both on the teacher level and the student level, getting beyond your own conception of I'm delivering something to you and being open to them feeding back into the system, I think is tremendous. And so impressive to see the students actually take it upon themselves to modify the project. I'm going to move. We've only got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to move to our last question. I'm going to start with Jeff. What are some of the tangible benefits for teachers in running a successful PBL program? How does this work? How does this amplify?
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. We have 5 minutes left, so we're going to go back to late night TV. I'm going to give you the top 10 benefits of PBLs. And by the way, Sarah, I want to shout out, I love PBL Works. So it's awesome to see somebody from PBL Works. So good for you. Okay, number one, improved test scores. By doing a PBL, there's a perceived misunderstanding that you're losing time for the curriculum. You have improved test scores because you're not going a mile wide and an inch deep. You are involving all your senses and its emotional experience. Studies have shown that you're going to have more dendritic connections. It's going to go to deeper learning. So you're going to get improved test scores. That's something you really got to sell people, but teachers see it once they buy into it and jump into it. Number two, transdisciplinary authentic learning that promotes skills that employers seek. Okay, when we graduate, we're not in a siloed job that's just math. I mean, the reality is we are more like a PBL. That's life. Life is a PBL. So this helps do that. Career awareness. You cannot teach a PBL without practicing real life authentic roles. So it shows that for teachers, shows that for students. Gives kids, wow, I love this. Maybe I want to pursue a career. We have so many kids in our school district that go into environmental careers and biology careers because of PBLs that we do. Advocacy. You really start, when kids start seeing all this, they think, wow, we should really take care of this. We should take care of that. We should take care of this. So it just naturally builds it. Number five, social emotional connections and an emotional learning experience. You learn best when your emotions are highlighted, whether that's a bad experience or a good experience. That emotional connection brings you that deeper learning. Shared reference points or learning reference points to add context to future learning. So you can always say, remember when we did this PBL? Remember when we talked about this concept? Here's where it plugs into this. Here's where it plugs into that. That's a moment that people can relate to. Because as you said, not everybody has the same common shared experience. There you are right by the beach, and some of those kids have never been to the beach. So like using a beach, in random as a talking point, but like this is a common shared experience that your kids had. Shout outs and graduation speeches. There is not a graduation speech we have not had through my 35 years that they haven't shouted out our environmental PBLs. I will say this, I have never had a kid shout out at a graduation speech gee, Mr. Rem, that was the best standardized test we ever had. That was the most memorable part of my 12 years. No, but every year they're shouting out our PBL experiences. Community buy-in based on student enthusiasm. They go home and they talk it up to their parents, so much so that our parents demand that we have these experiences in our district. Teachers with the guide on the side, rest your voice. You can watch the action happen and just kind of guide it. It's just such a cool feeling. And for teachers, number 10, it's a dress down day and it's fun. So that's kind of cool. So, top 10, we got them.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jeff. I'm gonna have to ask you for permission to share that recording in future professional developments and future conferences. What a great wrap up. I'm hoping to there were some great links shared. I know Sarah had some links. Nora, can we throw up that last Padlet real quick and see if we can drop these links in a place where we can share it with this whole session? And I apologize, it's my poor time management that hasn't given us more time to ask questions of these great panelists. But hopefully, I didn't see any questions in the chat. But go ahead, if you want to click on that last Padlet that Nora just dropped in. Al, you shared a couple of links. If you could put those in. Sarah, you talked about a few links. If there's any other case studies that folks want to share, resources that folks think would be valuable to this, would love to have you drop those in now. And as I don't know when Olivia is going to suck us back into the session. So I also want to just very quickly thank all 5 of our panelists. Those are some really inspirational examples of how we can engage our schools and engage our districts in environmental literacy and prove that it can be done anywhere. It can be done in any district. And some of your approaches are really quite innovative in how you're getting these pieces across. Yep, we've got a couple of seconds. I don't know if that's going to shut down the Padlet. The Padlet may stay open. Please drop some things in. Thank you for participating in this session. Thanks for the activity and the ideas in the chat. And it's all about partnerships. So hopefully you've gotten some good